First of all, on the agenda, we had reserve fund transfers, but there are no transfers have been submitted for this meeting. So, on to agenda item number 3, which is approving the minutes, which Debbie has included in here. April 3rd, I thought we had approved, but they're not in our book, so if we want to just take a look. I don't have any. Does anybody have any questions on the April 3rd minutes? Anybody want to make a motion to?
I'll make a motion that we approve the Tuesday, April 3rd, 2012 meeting.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Janet. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Then moving on to the October 30th minutes.
I have one comment
Yep.
about October, it says October 20th, and the date was actually the 30th.
Oh, October 30th, yeah. Okay. Also, I noticed under updates on meetings with the town's different department heads, payment of police officer, it wasn't that Newbury doesn't want to participate in paying a salary. They wanted to have all the towns share in the cost of the police officer. So if we could just change that. Anybody see anything else?
When you said my name is here, I just want to mention you said I cannot make the meetings. I made some of them. What was that comment about cannot make meetings? Because I had made some of the meetings. That's kind of just a general
With
statement.
the water department?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe just cross that off.
I mean, I didn't go to the last one that you went to the last one, but I did go to the selectmen.
joint
So I don't know what was discussed versus.
Maybe it was the 5 p.m. meetings you have to.
Yeah, I
get
missed
to.
one of them that I couldn't go because I had a doctor's, but,
In general?
Yeah.
Not missing all of them. Yeah. Okay. So make that change. So we'll hold off approving the October 30th minutes. I also had noted that we needed to approve the 9/18 minutes. That we had looked at them, but there was one edit to be made.
So do you want the September 18th on for the next meeting?
Yeah, why don't we
Okay.
redo it? The only change was, I don't know if you have them there, under the updates on meetings with the town department heads, under Larry's with the Council on Aging, it said, Mr. White stated he would recuse himself from any questions regarding the COA. And it wasn't any questions, it was he has to recuse himself from any discussion on mileage allowance reimbursements. So that was,
Oh, I thought we already took care of that one.
I don't know.
But I'll check. I know I have that
Okay.
because we talked about it.
Okay, maybe you
Right.
made it and maybe we just didn't.
I'll
Because that was
send it.
in October, the October 30th meeting that we discussed making the correction. We haven't met since then.
Okay.
So maybe you did it already, but,
I'll check it.
okay.
Okay, so for the next FinCom meeting, we'll have the September 18th, 2012, the October 30th, 2012, and then tonight's meeting minutes.
Okay. So next on the agenda is signing payroll or vendor vouchers. And do we have any?
There are no,
None?
you have no bills.
Okay, okay,
If you decide to purchase something, let us know, we'll
okay.
take care of it. And we did have a payroll for Linda in July, so probably if you wanna look in,
I gave
you
it to
sent,
him today.
okay, so we'll work on getting a timesheet and payroll for Linda ready for your next meeting. So
Okay,
that we can kinda pay her, you'll be getting busy now for the next couple months, so.
yep,
We just wanna stay on top of that.
okay. Okay, and then the next item was to review the fiscal year 13 budget balances, so, that's the sheet from July 2012 to December 2012.
Yes, it
Should-
says number 5 up in the corner. I did send this out on email to you, so you have
Yep.
an opportunity to review it before tonight. The town accountant prepares every month, the balances.
Yep.
So, you know, obviously at the end of December it was 50%. And she does put the percentage, handwrites next to the balance on any account that may be lower than
Be
that
low, yeah.
amount.
Yep,
And then there's some good reasons why some may be drawn out a little bit sooner in the fiscal year if there was a large expense that takes place early on in the budget year.
yep,
I know the town accountant has to buy some computer licenses and things like that, software licenses, so she may have to draw out a little bit sooner.
mhm,
But I think I'm more concerned with the ones that hardly draw on anything now, and then they have all this money left over, so then there'll be a big push to spend the money down before the end of the year. You know, like, you know, even like the first one I see here, Essex Agricultural Tuition, and everything
That's-
balance remaining is like probably 65 cents still remaining in there from,
Essex
70.
Agricultural, that's comes off, it's a cherry sheet assessment. It's actually, the state takes the money right off the top of our state aid.
So-
Those categories there at the top on what says recap,
yeah.
those are our assessments, state
Okay.
aid assessments. So we don't get billed for them. The state just takes the money from our,
So why haven't they taken them?
out of our cherry sheet aid.
Oh,
Because they
so,
haven't done the cherry sheet balance yet.
oh,
We
is
don't
that
have the
why?
cherry sheet yet.
So it's only done once, one
Basically,
sweep in
done it once a
time?
year.
Oh, okay.
So the mosquito control, we're part of Essex, Eastern Massachusetts, Eastern Essex Mosquito Control District. That comes right off the top. We're in Essex Agriculture, so we, unlike Whittier, Volk, or Triton, we don't have a seat at the table. They vote a budget, and that's, I think it's under a special act of the legislature that governs Essex Agricultural High School. So, it's not similar to Triton or Whittier. And then we get assessed for the MBTA.
Since we got the train in '99,
really?
Well, even if we didn't have the train,
we still got some, but it's,
you'd still be assessed because people from other municipalities that are nearby, it's a radius from wherever it is. So that assessment probably went up, but even abutting towns that don't have a train station, Georgetown is the only one, I guess. Oxford is an abutting town. They would get an assessment too.
Wow, I never realized
These
that.
people will drive from the community to Raleigh, yeah.
Wow.
To contribute to the transportation system.
What happened to our discounts?
So the operating budget starts with moderator.
Are we gonna go over each item or?
Well, I guess I would just say, if anybody has questions on specific ones, if you've had a chance to look at them, I had some questions, but I think you had, I know you had some, Larry.
Right, under selectmen, line item 5113, administrative assistant wages. You know, it looks awfully low. The current year expenditures, 1849, is that current, or just that they're behind in not paying the wages?
No, we're absolutely up to date. We have a 10-hour a week. We're trying to be frugal with an administrative assistant, and she was hired during this fiscal year. The position was vacant. We
Oh,
had
okay.
some changes that we made. I can't remember her exact hire date. So we had a period of time when we didn't have an administrative assistant.
So basically, the budget was established while she was still working full-time.
No, this
No.
is Elaine,
Oh, it's Elaine.
and she
Okay.
works Thursday afternoon and
Yeah.
Friday mornings.
Yeah. I was thinking of Doreen.
Yeah.
Do you want me to continue, or does?
Yeah, why don't you go through your questions and then,
Okay, page 2, the town accountant, the expenses, 3860 out of the 48.
I think
I'm
that
just
was
looking at it
software
like-
licenses that you had to buy.
Okay.
So there was a,
I'm looking at stuff that is either,
Yeah.
that isn't like 50% or so
Yeah,
type of a thing,
exactly.
what it should be type of a
Mhm.
thing. Same thing for the Board of Assessors, professional services,
yeah, so I think
9,000.
that's a contract,
Yeah.
with
I think
vision
Vision
appraisal.
appraisals, it's when they do the evaluations, land valuations, when they do the inspections and things,
Mhm.
and that comes and goes. Doesn't.
Oh, okay.
It's not like it's a full-time employee that gets paid.
Right, it's not like a straight line type of a thing, you
Right.
can
Yeah.
lump
Yeah.
sum spend it,
If you
okay.
go to the assessors page on the website, you click on vision appraisal, you'll see, you can pop right up and put the Raleigh data in, you link right over, because Raleigh, is part of that contract.
Okay,
But we can certainly get answers or have the department heads responsible for these budgets contact any one of you with further information.
right. Then, page 4, the planning board.
Yes, on
Item
planning board.
5420, the expenses.
Yes, I did meet with, we have this year, we've funded a new planner position. As you remember, we have not had a planner. And I did meet with her to discuss this balance. Part of the reason why it's so low is, if you look at the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission line above it, we had budgeted, we had level funded based on the information we know on the assessment, and it was actually, when they voted their budget, was after we did our budget, and $75 was taken out of that, because their total budget's $2,970. So that was she had to take it out of her expense line, and I told her that actually the selectmen's expense could cover that shortfall for this fiscal year. She also was instructed to buy a planning book that has all kinds of laws and regulations in it that was quite expensive, as I recall in my conversation with her. So there were some things, so she is now working with me to, hold off, and monitoring this for the end of the fiscal year. She doesn't have very much expenses coming in for the
Right,
rest of the year.
okay.
Can I interrupt for a question I have? What's this, it might seem like a dumb question, I don't know, why if some of these accounts have like enterprise reimbursements, but then there's zeros in there, why? Like for the town accountant, you have enterprise account and zero, what's the
That's Article 7.
treasurer office,
That's
Zero.
That's the enterprise reimbursement on Article 7
oh,
of every town meeting warrant.
okay, so what, every department has to have an
No.
enterprise?
Only
for-
enterprise funds.
The article has, as you recall, it's accounting's fee, treasurer fee,
Okay,
okay, because that's the support of general fund, we have positions that are funded through the general fund and some through the enterprise fund, which is the water rates and then the tax rate. So those services, you know, we're all one town, so the effort that the accounting department and the payroll department, the treasurer collector do, is charged back to the enterprise fund for a portion of their work. And that's
They do
part of
work
the
for the water department, so they get reimbursed for that.
Oh,
It's not like it's a full-time job, but it's not being done now, but at one time, the treasurer was collecting the water bills. They would pay them in that office and process them. So the water department was reimbursing the treasurer's office for that time.
oh, so they're not doing,
Now they're doing it on their own because they've gone to a monthly billing system.
Yeah,
So
so
the-
it's just those other services, just even, you know, preparing, the accountant has to certify the books for the town, including the enterprise fund as well. So, I mean, there's services that we provide here at town hall, that we're reimbursed for out of the enterprise fund, and that's in the annual town meeting warrant budget.
And they
So-
also reimburse for insurance costs also.
so some of these accounts, they'll have money in there eventually? From, like, the
Yeah, they
accountant from,
transition over. I could get an answer for you or have the town accountant speak to you if
Oh, no, I just was
she
kinda
may be able to
curious.
answer that question better as to the timing on that.
And we wanna stop by, really, what I was trying to get at was the water, I was trying to ask the water department questions, but I didn't have this in front of me, but it seemed to me like there's, well,
They're at the back.
I thought that they were trying to spend some of their money, you know, and that's why they, got the kitchen and built the kitchen and the garage and did all that kind of stuff, because then they got high-end stuff too, because, they probably figured, well, we have the money anyway to spend,
Well,
from,
those came out of their expense line,
you know,
and that's why they were flagged. Because, well, the town meeting authorized in 2006, and the Board of Selectmen approved, town meeting approved the $100,000 for the garage addition to the existing building at 401 Central Street for the housing of equipment and vehicles, because they were being placed in the backyard of this facility. And they had started the construction, and Bob could probably, expand on this a little more. They didn't have enough in the budget, so they came back to town meeting this spring seeking $40,000 to complete the renovation. And back in this past fall, the accounting department had flagged some expenses that were coming in, construction related, on the expense and operation budget, which led to the Board of Selectmen in conducting an investigation into this. They haven't completed that investigation yet.
Yeah, basically what happens when you do a capital project like the garage, there was actually, when they bought the building, there was a foundation and part of a wall for a garage that the previous owner had started to build, and it never got finished. So the water department wanted to finish it and make an extra garage, and in 2006, they came to town meeting and sponsored an article and requested $100,000 to repair the garage and put the new garage there. When they went out to bid on that, they came in over the 100,000. So then it kind of sat in limbo for a while. They just kind of walked away from it. And was it 2010
Did the
or 11?
Whittier students work a little bit on it?
Yes, they did. But then they came back for the 40,000. And they submitted another article at town meeting, and they tied that article into the original article.
It was transferred directly into the 2006. That's why it appears that way on the sheet in one line.
And that happens quite often when somebody runs out of money in an account. A lot of times it'll be a wage account or something like that, or there was a union agreement where there was an increase in wages. And you'll see those happening. It'll be an article to appropriate X number of dollars to add to line items, et cetera, of Article 5. And that's how that works. What they did is in November of last year, they wound up with $68 in their account, in that article. So rather than coming back to town meeting and saying, look, we need some more money, they decided to take it out of their maintenance and operation account and just spend the money. I'm not sure they actually had the money in there to, well, they didn't have the money in there to do that particular project. It wasn't allowed, it wasn't authorized by town meeting. So that's when it started to get flagged.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
office, kitchen,
Yeah,
that wasn't part of the act.
and when we saw that there was only $68 left and we're seeing these $1,000 bills coming in, and actually what they spent was about $30,000 more. And that's when we decided to question.
More than what they had in their account?
More than
or
what they had in that article.
In that
Right,
article,
Yeah,
okay.
rather than call it an account, if we call it an article,
Okay,
let's see.
okay.
Because once it's specified in the article,
Mm-hmm.
you just can't, and we'll say, okay, they built the garage and they had 40,000 left over. They can't even take that money and spend it, because it's not for the garage.
Mm-hmm.
So once you put it in an article like that, get town meeting approval, you have to spend it on that
On that
particular
purpose.
project.
Mm-hmm.
And the town accountant looks at those quite closely
Mm-hmm.
when they have an article money like that, and make sure that what they're spending is actually for that particular purpose in that article.
Yeah,
So that's basically how it got tagged. And then we started to kind of question what was going on, and
yeah.
from there,
Are there requirements that, you know, for buildings like that it go out for bid?
yes.
And shouldn't there be a tie-in between what the bid was
And
and
the
what the article is?
Well, yeah.
And is there any checks on that? I mean, townwide?
We do have a townwide procurement policy. We always follow the state law anyway,
Mhm.
chapter 149, 30, 39M, and 30B. In 2007, the selectmen issued a townwide policy that reflected that, but some internal controls over the policy. And in 2011, the Board of Selectmen again reissued the same policy, emphasizing it, distributed it. So there is internal controls. We were not aware. I did get involved. I consult with department heads. I did work with the water department on their bid for their some water meter device that they use. So that was a really large contract that I worked on. But I hadn't known any.
But they can skirt that if it's under a certain dollar amount, though. They don't have to, like that's what they did with the gates, isn't it? Because they made them
Yeah,
three
if it's
separate
under
increments and stuff
5,000.
instead of lumping them together. So they, then have to go out and, for bid on that.
Right, and that's what they did with this project, and they
Right,
break
you
it out
know.
into smaller projects, so
And
they didn't
you-
have to bid.
You can't do that.
Right, shouldn't be
Well,
done.
it's in state law.
Yes,
So-
it's pretty clear.
Well, I guess it's under investigation and we'll wait to see,
Yeah.
but, it seems like there should be some checks and balances.
We are working on it. After the first meeting that the selectmen, I believe, had with the finance committee, they did vote a directive, sort of a three-prong approach to handle this. And the first one was to direct me to work with the water department staff in setting up policies on operations, protocols, and dealing with the commissioners and board meetings. The second was to fully integrate the town procurement policy we have into their operations. I know that currently the business manager has instituted a purchase order system right away. She's getting involved in it, and that hadn't been happening. And then the third is to institute some fiscal policies. So we do have a fiscal team here, the department heads meet, and we've met actually with the business manager, and we're working on some fiscal policies that will, really improve the way the budgeting is being done, and other controls between accounting and treasury and posting things, and some of these indirect costs that Peter mentioned. So we are working on that under the direction of the Board of Selectmen.
So is there any thought to, looking at whether it makes sense to keep it as an enterprise fund or have it come back under the town?
That was
For time
not
control.
discussed by the board.
haven't discussed
That
that
would be
yet.
fully on the taxpayer, and we would have to absorb the cost of that operation into the general budget. And we're only, we raise taxes by 2.5%, so operationally, it would be
A bird.
really hard to take that and put
Mhm.
$1+ million onto the tax rate
Right,
with a new treatment plant coming online.
and everybody who has a well wouldn't be thrilled with that either.
Another point.
I don't have a well. So on these expenses, well, this page of expenses, page 14, under the operating budget, several lines, well, are fairly low. Is it all related to what you were just talking about?
Yeah, as you can see, there's a county retirement, they pay a share of that for their employees. Health insurance, they pay their employees' share, reimburse the town for it. Same with the life insurance.
Yeah, and none of those have been touched, so I was wondering why that part of the budget is still at 100%.
I think we take those at the very end.
That's what I think. I can get an answer to
Oh,
that, similar
okay.
to what Peter had asked.
Okay,
That's all that, Article 7,
okay.
the transfers back to the general fund.
And the same with principal, no principal?
That's all the borrowing, so that's pretty much, and
Well,
you'll
they-
see that in the budget when we vote at town meeting.
Yeah, it's typically when they come due, when the principal and interest come due.
Whatever the contracts are for the schedule on repayment.
Okay. And then back up at the operating expense, like other post-employment benefits, everything's been spent.
So we had set up a trust fund at the last town meeting because we've been advised that we really have to do this by, the bond rating agency.
Oh, that's, okay.
That's for
I know,
retiree
yeah,
health insurance.
Yeah. So it just was paid already, okay, gotcha.
So the line that the selectmen are focused on is maintenance, the $455,000.
Mm-hmm,
That, because that went up by 95,000 from
mm-hmm.
fiscal 12 to 13, and
And it's more than 50%.
the reasons that the selectmen heard last budget season were projected increases in fuel costs and electrical costs related to, they use electricity for the well pumping stations, for a lot of things, so they seem like very valid points, so the selectmen voted to recommend that budget based on that, so therefore now they're taking, they're looking into these expenses now that were coming in related to construction of offices and
Yeah.
kitchen, et cetera.
So is the construction complete, or is there still more?
Well, the board did go on a site visit, and
I would say it's very close, if it's not complete, it's very close to being complete. The building is being used, so it's weather tight, and all the doors and everything are in place, the windows are in place, all that stuff, so.
What's this line, treatment plant A2510, SA13, and it has an adjustment of 2.3 million?
that may have been what we voted on at town meeting.
Those,
We had
it's
to put-
Article 20, 510, and special article, special town meeting article 13 of 412.
So they haven't, the treatment plant construction loan from the state revolving fund has not been permanently borrowed. That's imminent at some point, so I think you'll see that number move down to the principal and interest in fiscal 14, you see at the bottom of the page,
Okay,
once it gets permanently borrowed. So they file when they do the construction, it's a different process under this state loan, so they have to do some filings, they go to the DEP and for approval, so it's not like we just got the money up front. And
Okay.
we have it in the bank and we're paying the general contractor. There's filings that are done, I believe, on a monthly basis. I can get more
Okay.
Yeah,
information.
I think if you look under the interest portion, there's the last two
Yeah, that
lines,
was
it
the,
says interim loan 1 and 2,
mhm.
that's what Debbie's talking about.
Okay, so when the paperwork is finalized or whatever gets beyond a certain point, then
It'll
it's
go
no
down
longer
a little.
considering an operating. It looked funny as an operating expense since it's the
Yeah,
water
so they see that
treatment.
up there. I can get some clarification from Laura Hamilton, the business manager on that, or Karen Summit, the treasurer.
Are they still hiring people for in the water department for besides the one that we know that they're gonna be trying to fill, the assistant mid,
At this point, and you were here that meeting, so the
Yeah.
administrative assistant position is posted. We have a retirement, so there's no additional.
cause I heard, well, I was talking to the two guys after that are on the board there, and they were telling me that there might be a need for somebody who has a technical background to actually run the treatment plant,
Mhm.
because I don't know if anybody, you know, including John, has that kind of background, you know, to,
Typically, you need somebody with a microbiology degree.
Yeah.
They have to be a microbiologist.
so they're gonna have to be
run a
hiring
treatment
someone?
plant. I don't know what their plans are, but I wouldn't be surprised if they would have to, yeah.
Well, the other thing is they were mentioning about an option about how you know, getting a management company or someone to handle that, so then that leaves the town the liability if anything goes wrong, you know, they won't be responsible.
Right, I
You
think
know,
one of the
from-
commissioners has
Mhm.
made that suggestion, and I believe they're looking into it. I think it's Merrimack that just went through
I
that
think
process.
there's several municipalities that, you know, they go out to bid or, you know, procure, a company to come in and, with specialties to run treatment plants, wastewater plants, that's not for us, but, so I think what they're trying to do is maybe do a cost-benefit analysis and see what's in the best interest of the town, you know, what is the most cost-effective way to run this, you know, new assets, a very expensive and high-tech, system. You know, so it would be just, as I understood, just for the treatment plant, not to run the operation of the department,
Mhm.
is what I understood that to be.
Anybody have any other questions they wanna bring up?
Yeah, I wanna continue on page, page 5, police department, the, police cruiser, that's a one-time expenditure, is that correct? For,
It's an annual budget item because the police cruiser is on is in a fleet schedule where there is a rotation every year of a new cruiser.
okay.
One comes in, one
Right,
goes
that's
out.
what I figured, I
So,
just wanted to make
If,
sure.
if he wanted to add to the fleet schedule, then he would need to come in with an article to the selectmen and use the capital expense, and that would be voted on standalone from that. So this is just the annual replacement of one cruiser.
Right, okay. Continuing on page 6, the harbor master, salary and wages for the harbor master and assistant are zeros.
You know, I believe the harbor master does supplement his budget with a grant. And
Particularly on the pump out.
yes, because this, we're in a program where the state really goes after municipalities that have harbors to have a pump out boat for boat storage because of environmental concerns with that. So the harbor master has been part of this grant program from the state. And I believe a portion of the wages for the pump out boat operators, their seasonal jobs, high school and college students, you know, operate this on the weekends, and I think that's why, but I can get clarification from Bill Demento on that.
As a matter of fact, I think the state supplies the half the
Yeah,
pump out
the boat,
itself.
yeah.
Page 7, streetlights, budget of 34,000 and nothing's been spent. Is that replacement of the lights or?
No, that's the electricity used by the streetlights.
Oh, okay.
And it's basic, it's based on the light department's operation, and it's plugged into what they call a state formula that calculates the cost of the street lighting.
Okay, so that would be hit like at the fiscal year end or so?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
And the light department has graciously forgiven the cost of that for the past several years. I don't know if they'll be able to do that again. So that money comes out at the end of the fiscal year, certified as free cash. So there is savings to the town, when that happened.
Okay.
But we do have to have that in the budget.
Right.
You can't talk about it, I'm sorry. But they have graciously forgiven the cost of the town street lights.
How much does it cost anyway for the light the common for the Christmas? I mean, that's,
I don't
How
know
much
if they
that
cover
is.
that cost in that street lighting.
Right, it's a lot,
Yeah.
lot cheaper than it used to be.
oh,
We've gone to all LED lighting now,
oh,
so it's about a third of what it used to be.
oh.
For a number of years, the Ladies Auxiliary of the Raleigh Fire Department took collections to pay for it.
Oh,
Problem with the light department has is a state law that says you cannot sell your electricity for less than you pay for it. And the first year we put the lights on the common, the light department paid for the lights, and the state DPU on their report picked it up.
Hmm.
Sent us a nice friendly letter. So we can't do that.
So Deb, I was just wondering, is there any budgeting thing that you know that you're gonna have some free cash available right now? Do you project anything? In any
It
areas?
hasn't been certified yet, so as soon as we get that information, we do expect that we will, partly because the town is frugal in its expenses. If we don't need to spend something, even though it's appropriated in our budget, we don't. We do, so you'll see that happen often, you know. We do try to maintain what's in our budget lines. We're not here all the time to the finance committee. Once in a while, we will have a problem. We may need to come to you for reserve fund transfer, but we do try to work within the budget line, so I
So
do
like-
expect to get free cash. It will be on the positive side, I'm just not sure what.
Like
When
I
will
see
they-
the litigation expense and professional fees, is that gonna, you think that will be all spent, or is that gonna,
Well,
from,
the thing with litigation and town council services, if we're we have 3 unions, if we're in negotiations, because contracts are up in one particular year, there may be higher utilization in a particular year on labor expenses. We do have litigation in cases that are open, they're very old cases that are still active. And if they finally get continued, and if they finally go to trial, then there'll be expenses related to that in a particular year. So that's kind of, it's hard to say, you know, but we budget that amount, and we work hard with the town's attorneys. They really just do municipal law. They know it's you know, different in the public sector than the private sector. So we do work hard to maintain it, but it's there. It's really insurance for the town.
When will the free cash be certified? Like, when will we know the final amount?
The accountant is
from the-
working on that now. There's one piece that they were trying to finalize, that the town accountant and the business manager in the water department, some balance sheet information, and once that's finalized, it will be sent to the DOR. So we expect within a month or so.
Oh, okay.
Page 8, excuse me, page 8, the hydrant rental, 35,000, nothing spent. Is that also just?
Yes, I get a bill for that from the water department towards the end of the year.
Okay.
So that's for all the hydrants. So the general fund has to pay the enterprise fund for those hydrants.
Is that for the water used, or
For
what?
the hydrants.
Or just
The
for the,
hydrants themselves, where's
the
the
hydrants
enterprise fund,
themselves.
that's a capital expense for them
okay,
to replace and maintenance, to replace and capital to put in new ones. So that's legally charged back to the town, because the town then owns them.
right, okay. Page 9, the veterans, veterans district.
Yep, that's the assessment, and
Okay.
we were wondering about that ourselves. The board of directors actually hasn't met yet. As soon as they vote, and our representative from the town is former selectman Dick Cummings, as soon as Terry Hart, the director, you know, gets his board in, they'll vote, and then that goes towards the annual operating budget. So, I heard that they're gonna be meeting in February. Because I was like, don't they need their money?
Right.
And the other line is the benefits. So, as you know, I had requested that veterans benefit line be increased in this fiscal year 13 because we have utilization, and we're monitoring it. We seem to be doing well. You just never know. There could be a new veteran that moves into town that qualifies for a lot. There are spouses of veterans, widows that qualify too. So you just never know, and you don't know the cases. It's really almost like, us social services that you just can't plan for it. But the state law says municipalities must pay for veterans benefits for veterans living in your municipality. And we do get reimbursed from the state for up to 75% of the cost, but it doesn't come back until the next fiscal year. So Terry
Okay.
Hart handles that. Have you met Terry yet?
No, I haven't.
Seen him in town? Yeah.
Page 10, this under Recreation Department field maintenance. Everything's been spent.
Yeah, typically this time of year you'd see that, because they won't be starting up again until after the next town meeting. As far as they're gonna need their expenses, the fields there won't be any grass cutting or anything like
Okay.
that until they get their new budget, so.
And that will be supplemented by a revolving fund too,
Mhm.
if you recall in the article at town meeting. The other user groups, the Triton Soccer Group, the Little League Group, they all pay into a town revolving fund for use of the fields. They'll have exclusive use of the field, a baseball field for a certain period of time. So that will supplement some of the mowing and things like that have to happen out there.
So like any preparation in like May or something like that, May
That's
or
right.
June, is kind of,
Spring
But-
cleanup would be handled since they've used the field maintenance, they're gonna have to use the revolving fund, and I don't have that balance in front of me.
okay. I think you answered pretty much everything else.
Oh, on Bradstreet property, Bob and I are happy to tell you, we did sell the house and barn.
know what?
We did.
Good.
I thought I saw the real estate transfer in
Or
the, I
did you
looked
see
it up. What is that?
Yeah,
What's
believe
that
it or not,
address?
so that property's gonna be back on the tax rolls, and,
Good.
and the money goes into the CPA account.
How much money was it sold for?
$285,001. So that was the appraised price. The market had gone down and the house is
Mm.
So how much
facing
land do they have with that?
almost 7 acres.
7 acres too, for that price?
Agricultural land.
Oh. So that means now,
It can be
are they gonna have that community farm anymore, or is that gone now?
Oh,
Is
no.
that still
That's a separate parcel.
separate part of it? Oh,
Separate parcel.
Yeah.
oh.
There are, 4 or 5 separate parcels there?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
and then there's the vast open space, passive recreation that's under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission that goes all the way out to the water. Then there's the active recreation parcel, which is under state law protected parkland that the Parks and Rec Committee are working to develop. I'm working with,
But
a
that property
tin-
with that house, does that driveway go with it too, or is that?
well, the road coming in is,
Is not with the house at
Yeah.
this point.
But-
What's set aside in that same area, not necessarily, it's off the roadway, it's another parcel that's set aside for low-income housing, because we used for 4 categories in the CPC money to buy the property, so you have to hit each one of those
Mhm.
in order to make it work. So the roadway, when the low-income housing gets developed, will become a town road. It'll be rebuilt and become a town road. And then the driveway where that ends will be the driveway to the house.
Oh.
So they'll be using the same road, but at some point it'll turn into a driveway.
But you'll need to go use that driveway, don't you, to get up to even to where that community,
The community gardens.
Gardens
yes.
is
But
too.
no, that'll be part of the roadway, because that's where it ends.
oh, that's where it'll end right
If you
there?
look at the plan takes a road off of that up by the community garden.
Oh,
And it's actually a cul-de-sac type situation where there'll be some parking for the passive recreation, so people can go in there and park and walk through the woods.
oh.
And also the garden people can do their thing at the garden.
Hmm.
One last question on page 11, the Essex County retirement. it's mostly spent, is that something you have to pay up front?
Yes, so it's an assessment, so, and we actually get a prompt payment discount if we pay it, I believe, before the end of July. So, you know, even though we have to budget what they tell us, you know, there'll be money perhaps in that line.
Okay.
I'm not sure, I don't have it in front of me. So maybe a balance in there, and that could be the savings that we have. So we do pay that right up front.
I don't have any other questions,
Okay.
so.
Anybody else? All right, that's very helpful.
And I did include under your discussion for FY13, information because the governor had announced about a couple weeks ago, a month ago, I guess, his intention to cut state aid to cities and towns and schools this fiscal year. And he didn't say the chapter 70, but he did say regional school transportation, which he has the authority to do without the legislature. And I believe one of the special ed accounts. But he does have to go to the legislature to get permission to cut what's called the unrestricted general government aid account, UGGA. It's on the cherry sheet. So the selectmen discussed this at a meeting in mid-December, sent a letter to Senator Taryn Hill expressing their opposition to any cuts. And we did get a follow-up from Representative Hill. He had signed on, along with a consortium of other legislators who represent regional school districts, protesting any cuts to the regional school transportation. The law was, when these schools were created, that if you created a regional school district, the state was gonna cover 100% of the transportation costs. So we know what happens. They don't fully fund that line. And it comes at an extraordinary expense for rural communities, you know, Berkshire County, you know, Hampden, you know, not just even, you know, here on the North Shore. So he had sent in a letter on that. He sent a copy to the school committee, to the selectmen, and he did say that when the governor made these announcements, it was the end of the first quarter of the fiscal year, and they were looking at revenues, and the administration and finance department had thought they were about 500 million short, but he said things are leveling off now that we're in the middle of the fiscal year, and they think actually they're down by 200 million, and maybe even Peter knows because you work at the state. But so things, he may not need to go after this account, we're not sure, so wait and see.
Okay. So next on the agenda is to discuss the fiscal year 14 budget process. So what is the direction that the selectmen are giving the boards and departments?
Bob, do you wanna read off those ones?
Yeah, actually, what we've done so far, we're just starting to get onto the budget itself. And of course, the big one there is obviously the school budget.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a meeting last week, and under discussion 6, under the meeting worksheet, we've begun the process, and we've estimated the new property tax revenues as follows. It's 2.5% levy. We're gonna take in about $288,982. And new tax growth, it looks like about $145,000. So with a total of $433,982. So we've actually discussed that at the Board of Selectmen level and decided to send the Triton School Committee a letter and making a good faith offer to them for the town's assessment for fiscal year 14. And we voted on a revenue sharing plan that splits in half the 2.5% levy and the new tax growth for this revenue with the school. So the new estimated tax revenues, as I said, $433,000. So we have offered them $216,991 which would come to about 2.8% of our increase for, over the fiscal year 13 budget. So we're giving half of our income from tax growth and the 2.5 levy. And we'll see how that works. We think that that's a fair and equitable way to try to approach the problems that we have with the school's budget being 60+% of our total budget. And it makes it very difficult for us in the long run to be able to take care of the things that we need to take care of in town. One of the bigger ones is being salaries. Sometimes we can't meet the requirements of what the salary should be. We know that we're behind. And even last year, we decided to do a study, a personnel study, to see where we stand in our categories and in our area here. And that report's coming.
We're working on it still, yeah.
Almost finished, but
A few more weeks, yeah.
that'll give us a better idea of where we stand. It's hard if you're on the low end of the scale and you have somebody retire and you try to replace that person. You can't find people. It's very difficult. So we're hoping this will work. At least it's a start when we start our negotiations with them.
Did you say that letter already went out to them?
Yes,
Or?
I don't know if it's
Actually,
been actually been
it
mailed,
was
but-
written today, and tomorrow the selectmen will stop in the office and
Sign
sign
it.
it and send it.
Oh, okay, okay.
They discussed it in length at our meeting on Monday evening.
Yes.
And I have a copy of the school committee letter is in your packet, so
Yeah,
you
I
can see
see
what
that.
they've asked
Yeah,
of the town.
Yep.
And this way, you know, there's gonna be no surprises. This is really the limit to what we can do.
Has this approach been discussed with the other towns?
Actually, it has. We are scheduling a tri-town meeting with the other two towns. But last year when we had our meetings, this topic came up, and everybody there seemed to be in agreement that we should try to do something like that. At least now we know what our increase will be. Before it was just, you get your sheets, your cherry sheets, all your stuff together, and all of a sudden the school comes in with we need this much money. And if two towns vote for it, we're on the hook for it. So, one of the other things we asked some questions, is about the Employees and Retirees Healthcare Reform Act. The town of Rowley has worked on that, and we've got a program in place now where our health and benefits conform with what the state says we should be conforming to with the GIS. GIS?
Well, we didn't join the GIC,
GIC.
but it's a comparable,
And you can do that. You can join the GIC, or you can have a comparable plan, and we've gone with a comparable plan. So we're kind of meeting their requirements. I believe, at this point, I don't think the school has done anything.
we are asking for that information from the school. I know Karen, I know you had raised this last year, about what they were doing, and the town, we negotiated with the 3 unions, we met with them, they agreed to switch to a tier-based plan. The town of Rowley's ratio, employer to employee, and employer to retirees, 52.5, 47.5. So people always say, where did you come up with that? Because actually about 10 plus years ago, that was all the town could afford. They increased it from 50 to 50 to 52.5, and we've never gone over that. And we're one of the lowest, I think, around
reimbursing, yeah.
in terms, you know, I think maybe a couple of towns are 60-40. So because the town as an employer doesn't shoulder that much of the cost for the employees, you know, when we look at what joining the GIC or not, in terms of the state, because we have that ratio, you know, we're fine, but we want to know what has the school done
Right.
to take advantage of the new healthcare law.
Yeah. That had been raised in the committees, the communications committee that we've been participating in. It had been raised in the first meeting, but never discussed since then. They handed out some information, so we can bring it back up and see if they're able to share anything.
So the select
Try
board
from
will
that
be
angle too.
posing those
Yep.
questions as
Okay.
well.
Okay.
And then continuing on So as we're starting to develop the budget guidelines for fiscal 14, you know, there's still a lot of unknowns as right now in January. We won't know what the state aid amount is. We base our state aid estimate on the governor's budget, and that will be released the end of January. And of course, that's all
House one.
subject to
House
change. House one, as soon as the legislature gets it. But we need a placeholder for something. And of course, the same with the chapter 70 for the schools. They're in the same position as we are. So as we get these numbers in, fixed cost numbers, and revenue numbers, you know, we kind of build the budget around it. So the selectmen tend to issue preliminary budget guidelines that tend to be conservative in nature because we don't have all the information in place. But we've got to start getting budgets
Something
prepared
together.
by the department
We've
heads.
gotta have at least a kind of a look at it.
Yeah.
To see where we stand.
You know, and if things shift in different ways, we had a terrific winter last year. And that is why, you know, we did have money. We can overspend the snow and ice line, and then it comes off the next year. So we didn't even spend what we had appropriated, never mind have to worry about this fiscal year taking it off the top.
Right.
So that helped the town, and we'll see that in free cash. And this winter has been pretty good so far. Yeah, today was,
Exactly.
today was a little, you know,
Yeah,
concerning,
well,
but
well,
it wasn't that bad in the
Well, at
end.
least it was
no.
during the day and
I know.
possibly no overtime, who knows,
Exactly.
but that might have been a benefit.
Better schedule, no snowstorms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think the commuters like that.
So as you know, and you're familiar with the budget package, we have the Form 1, which is the summary page. It's a pretty simple form. Form 2 is the wage breakout. The expense detail is on Form 3, and then the capital. And I remember during the budget process, Peter had mentioned last year about having some more information. Since I'm gonna be working on this within days and preparing this, if there's a radical change, that will need to go to the selectmen as well, because these forms were agreed upon many years ago by the FinCom and the selectmen as a uniform way of presenting budget data, you know, from budgets as large as, you know, the fire department to as small as, you know, the town hall expenses or the copier or something like that. So I'm just looking for maybe what you had in mind, and if it's possible, we can certainly, you know, maybe put a little more historical data if that's what you were looking for.
Well, I think I was looking at, like, I wasn't so much concerned about what the budget from year to year was. I wanted to see what was spent versus, you know, what was, you know, spent this year versus what was spent last year, you know, like, just to see, you know, 'cause anybody can throw a number up for a budget, doesn't mean necessarily mean it's gospel, but if you think if you have expenses and you see what was spent to date, you know, that can give you a better picture, you know, than
Well,
just,
you do have a monthly budget balance report, and since we don't know, and a lot of budgets are cyclical, as we discussed with the rec committee and the cemetery even, they're not doing any work, they stop working from November till the end of April, I think,
well,
so.
those are exceptions.
So it's hard for me to, you know, if you want an up-to-date picture.
Those are exceptions. I'm thinking more like the larger departments, like the police, the fire, well, the police especially, the fire maybe, but, you know, some of the larger, the water department, you know, those departments, you know, the little ones there that you're talking about, that they only have they don't have the same reoccurring expenses every month. I'm not talking about that, but I was talking about more like the police and stuff like that, and the water department, and, you know,
Well, even them to some degree, and it's probably not as much as
Yeah.
other departments, but some of them, depending on what their fire department is an example,
mhm.
depends on their number of runs. So if they have a couple of big fires, then there's gonna be more money spent in that particular time frame than
Yeah,
just
but those things can be explained, I'm saying, that's what the
Well, yeah,
purpose
there's
of
no
a
question about
budget
it,
is,
but-
you just put qualifiers in there and say, well, this is because of this reason,
Mhm,
that's why.
mhm.
I mean, you look at the water department, you see like the maintenance area there, you can just tell, you know, something doesn't really, you know,
Yeah.
seem right, you know, just looking at that, so.
Yeah, I
You know,
know, they had the same situation like last year, we got an explanation that they had to replace several of the main gates that operate the mains going through the various streets. They replaced it, five or six of those because they
Yeah.
had problems with them.
Before it gets cold, because then they stop doing the outside
Right,
work.
you can't do the
So-
street openings when it's cold.
So there was
Freezing
an
up.
explanation as to why their budget was lower than it should be, you know, other than the additional expenses that the selectmen are looking at, which will add to that percentage being low, but they did explain that, you know, they're not out in the street, they can't dig up the roads because we don't have any road openings from, I believe, mid-November,
Well, it's actually, I think it's the end of November until the
Really?
spring thaw,
yeah.
until the frost goes out of the
Until the
ground.
highway surveyor makes that determination, so, you know, in terms of these forms, what we could do, I mean, unless somebody's increasing their budget or asking for some astronomically high number or something that exceeds the selectmen's guidelines, I think that would be they'd have to defend that and show what's happening this year to justify that. But I'm trying to figure out mechanically here on these forms, is there something in these templates that, because if I even put what you've spent up to date here, it's just not gonna be a number. Somebody could have not submitted a bill in a particular time. I mean, it's changing all the time.
Well, is there a
Every-
way to show the historical, what was budgeted as well as what was spent
In prior
prior
years.
fiscal years?
Well, we have the actual. We have what's appropriated this year, the current year.
Yep.
And we have the actual. I was saying I could probably go back one more year, so you can have two actuals.
Okay.
What was appropriated this year, you have your monthly reports, and if you're getting updates on what's going on, or any reserve fund transfers, because the number's low, then we'll have the requested line, and then the finance committee recommendation line. Would that help, like one more year of an actual, so you'd have two actuals, that's exactly what was spent. The current year we're in, what was appropriated, which that's what we have, and then the requested. And
You
then
say
no-
actual, you mean actual?
That was what was spent, yes. When the
From,
books were closed,
from,
that
s-
would
like,
be-
say if we're looking at January, I mean December, so then you have actual from December of the previous year, is that what
Well,
you're
no,
saying?
it's a total,
Fiscal
it's in
year.
total,
A full total for the whole year,
right. In this particular sheet, it's actual, it's fiscal year 11,
yeah,
and it's the actual expense for collector salary.
yeah,
Then you have the fiscal year 12 appropriation,
yeah,
okay, that figure shows. Then you have the fiscal year 13 request. So you've got 2 years, what was actually spent in 11, what was appropriated in 12, and what they're requesting in 13.
so, I mean, I can add, you know, this was last year, so I mean, you know, for example, FY10. So when we do FY14, we're gonna have what you're requesting in 14, we'll have what you appropriated in 13, and then we'll have the actual for 12 and 11. I'll just keep the 11 on, because that's what's, when we close the books and we have to inform the DOR, you know, that's the process, that this is what happened at the end of the year.
And then we'll have the monthly report,
And you can-
access to it.
And you can certainly, during the budget meetings with the department heads, you know, kind of get some information from them
Yeah.
about what's going on this year. To
I think
ascertain
that would be
whether
great.
they need the money or not need the money, or even if it's a level funded budget, and you
Mhm.
wanna know how they spend it, you know, in what manner they spend it
Yep.
during the course of the year. Okay, so I'll add on, I'll keep 11 on, it's not gonna make any work for me, because I already have it on there, so.
So that's
Okay.
good.
But that's it then, and then we have,
what about footnotes though, or something, like if something's really different, you know, just put a footnote down too, or is
well,
that too much
we do
work, you
that
know?
because we know the budgets are scrutinized by the selectmen and the finance committee, so if there's sort of an aberration from, or, some, request that exceeds the guidelines
Right,
in a budget, not on an article,
Mhm.
I think we always have a narrative or an explanation, and of course, there's gotta be meetings to discuss that, so you have the information you need to make your decision.
Okay. Sounds good.
So it would be probably sometime toward the end of this month that you would give preliminary guidelines to the department. So right now, that's not out yet.
No,
You haven't got it out yet.
And then when would they, like, first be starting to come back with their preliminary budgets? Like, when should we start
When do we-
kicking
what's-
off
what's
our
the date we
regular
want 'em back in?
meetings?
January 28th, the selectmen will be issuing preliminary guidelines, and I haven't had a chance to speak to Bob Snow about this, but they'd probably be conservative in nature based on, we don't have all the information in.
Yeah.
And we'll get that out to the department heads, they'll start working on preliminary budgets. We always have to monitor the Triton activities to see which direction they're going
Yeah.
in, because that can radically change the bottom line.
Right.
And we're in negotiations with unions for fiscal 14, so, and those are open discussions right now, so to have very thoughtful and productive meetings, your busiest time that I would say is the end of February and March. I think March will be very busy for the finance committee, because by then we'll have everything,
Okay.
and then it's always a crash landing as the first week in April when it finally finishes.
Uh-huh.
I know last year, I think we had a couple meetings in end of March, like twice a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was very busy. And I was thinking, I think you prefer Wednesdays for meetings. I had put together a very preliminary schedule for the selectmen based on a town meeting that would be at the first Monday in May, which is May 6th, and I kind of backtracked it out. And what I could do, Karen, is email that out to the finance committee in preparation for your next meeting with a schedule of meetings that you guys can look at in advance and then mark up at your next meeting and decide if that's gonna work for you. Because the selectmen will be faced under the same pressure to meet and have budget
Okay.
meetings as well.
Okay, sure. But tentatively, it'd probably be like starting the last week of February
That'll be
and then
really
through
busy.
March and
I think
whatever.
if we could have you guys meet again in your early to mid-February, as soon as we issue the guidelines, and even just still talk about revenues. I think it might be good to have the town accountant come in as well, and members of the fiscal team, just to go over the revenues of where we see things stand before we start having budget presentations.
Okay,
So that's what I was thinking for maybe at the next meeting.
that sounds good. Are Wednesdays still good for everybody here? Is that
Yeah.
still the day? Okay.
How's Jack doing?
I haven't heard anything lately from Jack.
Yeah, yeah, I know he's home, so,
Hmm.
Okay. Any other questions on the fiscal year 14 budget process? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then discuss finance committee regulations and operating procedures. Does everybody have a copy? Or, actually, is that in here?
I didn't
I,
get a
I
copy
saw
of it,
your
no.
email.
And if you do have a final one, I was just trying to formalize it for as a town.
Yeah, we did not vote on it
Okay.
because we had some that, we had half of it that you had put together, and then I had typed up some other things to add, and I left them on my printer before the last meeting, so then we just circulated them. Did everybody have a chance to read them, or do you want to go through them now? Could I make a couple copies out here,
Oh,
Debbie?
absolutely, let me do it, Karen, please.
Okay. So, looks like Larry has his copy. So we,
I don't have mine.
1, 2, 3, 4 copies.
Does anyone have a school budget thing?
February, it's next, it's the first Thursday of February,
Okay.
whatever that is.
So we have one from the last one that was, which was one in November, at the end, December, I think.
Thank you.
And Linda, Stevie.
So we could just read through these together. Number one, the Finance Committee will establish regular meeting.
Excuse me, can we start? I have a question as far as establishing the following as guidelines to the operating procedures. I guess my question is more of a legal thing as far as whether they should be guidelines or something more official like directives or something. You know, as a guideline, it's like, well, we shouldn't take excessive bribes type of a thing. You know, it's kind of
That's really not a guideline.
no, but
That's a law, right?
the point being is that a guideline can be
A guideline-
broken very, very broadly.
Well, a guideline can give you flexibility.
Yes.
A regulation locks you in. So there are certain things you want regulated, such as taking a less amount of bribe.
Right.
And then there's guidelines that allow you a little bit of flexibility to work with what you're dealing with. So my thought is, there is obviously a state law that creates a finance committee. So that should be your regulation. I don't know if there's a
The bylaw does say.
town bylaw.
It does require that the FinComs have some operating procedures and regulations, I think. And I think it was just to take the bylaw and then sort of have some policies of
Yeah.
when you need and, you know, taking it a step further for some internal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And,
section
you know,
7 says, the Finance Committee shall establish a set of regulations for their operating procedures and make them available in printed form to the public. I think Larry picked up on this and asked where they
Right.
were, and I've never seen any, so.
Yeah, that's why I opened up a can of worms. But, I mean, I don't have a problem with all of what we come up with as guidelines. It just seems that it's not as forceful type of a thing, or not as binding.
Well, I don't think it needs to be, Larry. I really
Okay.
don't. I mean,
That's fine with me. mean, it's,
I feel more comfortable if I have a little wiggle room,
I agree with you.
so that, you know, you make a hard and fast rule, then you gotta follow that rule.
Right.
Yes,
But if you give yourself a little bit of wiggle room, you can make exceptions for things
Exactly.
that come along.
right.
So, obviously, I'm not a finance committee member, so I don't have to worry about it, but I've got my own hands full in other
Right.
places.
They don't pay us enough to have these.
That's why I was talking about excessive bribes.
Okay, so we good to move on to number 1? The Finance Committee will establish regular meeting dates throughout the year as much as possible, although ad hoc meetings may be required from time to time. So obviously, the exception is our busy season when we have many meetings as needed, but then we were saying we should really have a set date, like the second Wednesday of every month, and try to stick to that unless there's some unforeseen circumstances.
And that's consistent with a lot of the other town boards and commissions. We sort of have an unwritten rule. The selectmen and the Board of Health on Monday nights. Tuesday is Concom. Used to be FinCom. Wednesday's Planning Board. Thursday's ZBA. So, you know, it does help now that we're on local access cable for their scheduling to try to cover all these board and committee meetings. So, you know, that's I think the good stuff.
While we're going through that, can I propose that we just say the second Wednesday of every month for our normal time? Obviously, we're going to be making a different schedule for the end of February through May, beginning of May. But normally we can say second Wednesday at 7:15 p.m. And maybe we'll start that for February, the second
Yeah,
Wednesday of
okay.
February, then that'll be in the.
That'd be great.
Okay. Okay. Then the next one, chairperson or vice chairperson of the Finance Committee will establish the agenda for each meeting to be posted 48 hours prior to such meeting in accordance with the open meeting law. To add an agenda item, the chairperson or vice chairperson should be contacted. Makes
makes sense.
Okay.
That's fine.
3, at the start of each fiscal year, the Finance Committee will reorganize and elect the chairperson and vice chairperson. Then 4, at the start of each fiscal year, the Finance Committee will assign representatives to participate in meetings, in meeting key town boards, commissions, departments, in order to be informed of any budgetary issues that may impact the town. 5, when voting on interdepartment budget transfers, FinCom will review the treasurer's report of current balances of the impacted department budgets. Kind of already started doing that. 6, the Finance Committee will ensure that official meeting minutes are stored at the town hall under the care of the town administrator in the selectman's office and are available to the public.
I have a question on that. How do we ensure that? What are you trying to do there?
I think the point is that we have to keep minutes and we have to approve the minutes, and then once they're approved, Debbie's actually been
So
getting the
we-
copy and then putting them in the binder that we had.
We've got a binder here. Last year you
Yeah.
approved the expenditure of
Yeah.
that, so in case you don't have office hours, and Jack Demento was here frequently, and so it was just a relationship between the finance committee and the selectmen that, certainly we're here to serve the town, so if people need to see the finance committee minutes or would like to, they're more than welcome to come into our office. We're open during normal business hours to view minutes, which have to be available for inspection upon request under the state law.
Right.
So we were just thinking, if it's easier, we'll just continue to kind of keep the documents here. We can also talk about getting them on the website in electronic format to make them easier for people to read as well. Things we can talk about in the future, but you just want to be able to identify a location where the meeting minutes are being stored efficiently.
Well, maybe if we could say that we will have available in the town or something like that, rather than ensure the official meeting is almost like a if someone can't find the binder, then they can come back to us and sue us or something like that.
So how about the Finance Committee will make the official meeting minutes available, stored at the town hall under the care of the town administrator in the selectman's office?
That sounds fine.
Okay. And then 7, the Finance Committee will use the Roberts Rules of Order process for conducting meetings.
Is anyone else familiar with Robert's Rules?
We talked about it last time. It's the opening, closing,
Yeah,
Voting.
make a
Second.
motion, second a motion.
in addressing the board, as I should direct every comment I have to the chairperson, and we try to follow that, and I think that's like the best way to.
Again, I think, following it as a guide, but I've gone through and if we conducted a meeting according to Robert's rules, it would probably add about 400 or 500% of the time that we spend on it. I think we should have it as a guide, but I also think that we'll say we should have a person knowledgeable in Robert's rules, so that we'll say if 50 people come in to our meeting, that you would want to, we'll say, be more adherent to Robert's rules and say, okay, well, if these people are going to testify in front of the finance committee, that the testimonials be limited to 5 minutes and be pertinent to the subject at hand, so that we don't get a person rambling on, reading from their cookbook type of a thing. But you would need a person that is more knowledgeable in Robert's rules to kind of evoke that.
I think what you would use the Robert's Rules of Order for would be if something came up that you couldn't address under your own requirements, so you would use that as quote-unquote a guideline. Now, the former moderator always had a copy of Robert's Rules of Orders in his podium. So if anything that came up that somebody questioned and it didn't meet the bylaw didn't address it,
Right.
then he could then use that to go back and find out what to do, and that would be that would be onto the person that was asking those questions. They would have to follow those guidelines. You're not necessarily gonna use the book every time you have a meeting.
No.
Only if something unusual crops up, as you said, somebody, you get 50
Exactly.
people in,
Right.
what can we do to make this so that we're not still sitting here next week trying to get the meeting done? So you use that as a guideline, so
Yes.
if everything else fails,
Mhm.
you can fall back on that and use that as your guide to get you through the meeting.
Right, but as long as you have that person that can recognize that, we should fall back to it or so. Typically that's the chairperson, or they can delegate a sergeant at arms that can evoke something like that.
Well, I think it's just that most, we try to have some formality at a public meeting in concert with the requirements of the open meeting law. The open meeting law says that, if you have an agenda and, a particular person is not scheduled on the agenda, you don't have, and I wanted to, like me, I want to talk. You don't have to acknowledge me and allow me to speak. If there's a public hearing on something, that's different.
Mhm.
So, I've had my experiences with different types of meetings that are much more formal probably than what the finance committee has, but just that maybe some form where the comments are addressed to the chairman, generally, and then the chairman opens it up for discussion. I don't know if you've observed the selectmen's meetings, but that's it's a mild form of Robert's rules, and until we get to really big hearings
Mhm.
and things like that.
Mhm.
But maybe this is too strong, but
Well, I think you need something like that to fall back on.
modeled after
Right.
or
The
something.
best
Yeah.
case scenario is you never open the book, because you
Yeah.
don't have a problem.
Yeah.
But if you get to that one night where there's a problem and you can say, okay,
Exactly.
we're gonna go to Robert's Rules,
Right.
here's what it says, this is how we're gonna do
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
So it just gives you a little bit of backup.
Just to maybe modeled after, or more model the running of their meetings,
Or just as needed.
yeah.
I like the model, maybe the model
Yeah,
after, because
just to add a
we're
little
following,
formality.
like, for the voting, I think of the
Yeah.
basic things we
Mhm.
need to get done, the voting, making
Mhm.
sure that everyone's vote
Yeah.
is tallied and we're not just rushing through
That's-
saying, okay, everybody agree, okay, let's move on,
Yeah,
It's-
If we do rush, that's what kind of bothers me a little bit, is when we go to these meetings, we have these we rush through because we're running out of time, and then half the things aren't even, Brad, you just basically, take shortcuts. And, so if you talk about Robert's Rule, here's a case where not even the, really presenting what's on the, to vote on, you just, not reading everything and, just, making shortcuts there, so
Exactly.
I don't really know how, I remember, like, one of the people raised this as well, I didn't even know you mentioned one of the items, that was on there about, particular area, because, they just kind of just read everything really quick, and, somebody missed something and wanted to, raise their hand afterwards, and they said it was too late, so, I think we should be a little bit more, diligent as far as trying to, make sure that everybody understands what's being presented, and go through and read everything, and not say, well, we're gonna take a shortcut now, I'm gonna do this, because not everybody's paying that close attention, and, so.
I'm not following, like, where are we taking shortcuts as if the voting goes, because we always do take a motion and someone seconds and then we vote, so I guess I'm not seeing.
Well, we're taking shortcuts, some of them are not really reading everything that's on, there. We're not,
You're talking
You
about
know.
budget season?
what?
You're talking about budget approvals, or?
Yeah, I'm talking about what's in the budget, we're not necessarily reading every single, article or piece that's on there. We're just basically, I can't specifically think, but I remember last year that there was a case where somebody had not realized that they had, he was supposed to raise and say aye or something like that, cause they just read everything kinda quick and they didn't.
But are you talking about in the
That
town
was
meeting
the
itself?
meeting.
I'm talking about the meeting, the
The
town
town
meeting,
meeting.
yeah.
Oh,
We thought.
okay,
oh,
but
I
for
thought you were talking
finance
about-
meetings.
Oh, no, I'm not about the finance meeting, I'm talking about the town meeting.
Oh,
that we-
okay.
Okay,
Cause
Okay.
I'm talking about the town meeting that we
okay,
have.
cause I didn't follow,
Oh.
I thought you were saying we were taking shortcuts here as a committee.
No, not
That's
here,
what I
I'm
thought.
talking about the
Okay.
town meetings when we're meeting the people.
And that's the moderator that has to do, explain
Right.
that.
And we do have a new moderator, so that might have been kind of a breaking in.
And there is a thing, if they take a voice vote and most people say aye and there are only a few nays, they say voice unanimous, and that always used to confuse me, but that's part of the
Yes.
rules, I guess.
It is.
If there's only a few dissenters, it's not enough to matter. It's
That's in
considered
town
a
meeting
voice
time.
unanimous.
There's a book called Town Meeting Time, and I think I have a copy here, that Joan Peterson has, and, that's allowed, the moderator is
Yeah,
moderating the meeting, so they can call a voice unanimous if they just hear one.
is that what you were
Yeah,
referring
was-
Yeah,
to?
you may
From-
wanna
but-
speak to Joan and she could probably explain that. She's gone to moderated meetings and she's read that book through and through, so
Yeah, I think
she's
it's,
got a good
the
grasp of
omnibus
that.
budget is where you can put your hand up, and if you
Oh,
miss it, then
yeah.
you miss it.
Mhm.
But that is town
Hmm.
meeting, that's separate from what we're trying to do here.
Okay, so we'll just reword that to say the finance committee will base, let's see.
We'll
con-
model their meetings
We'll
based
use
on the-
Robert's Rules of Order as a model for conducting
Yeah.
meetings.
As a model. Okay. Okay, then for budget season, February to May, the finance committee will receive from the town account the balances remaining in any accounts as well as the projected income for the next fiscal year prior to the start of the budget discussions. So, kind of what we just talked about. Anything there?
Sounds fine.
9, the finance committee will obtain budget requests from each town department in advance of the meeting to jointly review the request with that town department.
Is that always feasible?
Should we say attempt to obtain?
Well, I certainly do the best. I think I was able to scan a lot last year.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the files were so large, I think they keep getting bounced back to me. That could be a problem on
Yeah.
certain people's,
Well, I
may be able to, but for the most part, we'll try to, I think email's the best. You guys are all over the place working and
Yeah.
commuting, I think
But what
email's
is,
the best.
how much in advance? Because if it comes the day of,
Some of them do come in at the last.
then I'm not gonna have time to review that
No.
before the meeting.
But I wanna, that's why I really wanted to meet tonight with you to see what could I do on my end to make sure that you, when I work with Karen and setting the agendas and scheduling budget presentations, what do you wanna see? Do you wanna see everybody in? Do you want, the small things I don't think really matter. If I can explain some budgets that I don't necessarily have control over, but can explain it.
Yeah.
But getting things to you in time, what do you wanna see? How soon do you wanna see things and things like that? And I know that's getting off topic of your regulations, but certainly you need to review this stuff. I know I staff the selectmen and
It's hard because you don't have the detail that you need very much in advance
when
to,
you're looking at numbers.
before you're giving people guidelines, and then they're getting back to you, and then you're trying to put the material all together for the selectmen and for us, so.
But you need it to have a intelligent and focused discussion, and
Yeah.
so I appreciate the fact that you need it, and I just wanna see what I can do
Well, I think
facilitate
as
that.
much as possible, if we can get it at least 2 days before the meeting,
Yeah,
you know, that, anything more than that's great, but at
Mhm.
least 2 days, because I
yeah.
don't have time to get
Mhm.
something during the workday and be prepared for a meeting
Mhm.
at night.
Mhm.
But I did think and I don't know if it's maybe here, but we talked about not really voting on everything until the end,
I was just
and
gonna say.
that may help
yeah.
us.
Mhm.
I was just gonna say, I didn't put it in here, we can add it, but we talked about,
Mhm.
last year it was a little rush sometimes, we're looking at the material for the
Mhm.
first time and reading through it while people are sitting waiting, and then we're asking them questions as we think of them. And then we were often voting that same night, just because
Mhm.
we were under the gun to
Yes.
get the budget out. So maybe it would be better if we could get the information ahead of time, have
Mhm.
that conversation
Mhm.
with people, but not necessarily be pressured to vote right then.
Mhm.
Have time to take it back, and if you think of other questions, then vote the next week, or I don't know if we want to wait till the end for everything, or, you know,
Right.
it really kind of depends how things
Mhm.
flow.
Right.
Yeah.
But at least we could
Yeah.
give ourselves a week in between to let the dust settle and think
Mhm.
if anything else came up that you thought of, or
Mhm.
had time to look into, or whatever.
Last year there were budget revisions, the guidelines
Right.
had changed.
Yeah. we
And
changed
so
it
I was dealing with
midstream.
multiple versions, budget,
Budget A and budget B.
they kept changing it. And I remember being here that first week in April, we were just getting really close to the end and it was tight. And I wanna avoid that this year, because it's stressful for everybody, and you're all volunteers.
Well, what struck
and-
me, about last year was, that was something I raised, is I didn't, I kind of like, didn't even realize, I've gone to every single finance committee meeting, that there was a point in which the town had some money, and I didn't, know that really per se, and, when I was going to the school budget meetings and we're talking about, it says, oh, no, town, we're this tight, and we weren't as tight as I thought we were, because things developed afterwards that you guys found more money to different things, but the finance committee wasn't necessarily aware of that. I wasn't aware of that,
Right,
that.
What kinda happens is, and last year was a perfect example with the snow budget. We always kinda figure we're gonna have to kick in more money, because we've gone over the appropriation from year to year.
Yeah.
But when we finally get down to the last putting together of the budget with all of the figures that we had, that's when we found out we had this extra money from the snow budget.
But the snow budget's about $80,000 if you don't have, but there was more money than that, I think, that was out there, right? There was other areas that,
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what we came up with, but I know we had, even with the cherry sheet, if we don't get that till late, then we don't know what we're gonna have and not have. There's things like that.
so is there any way
during
that,
the
well, I
process.
guess my point is there any way that the finance committee can be pulled in to them? Cause, when you have these numbers, that was the step that was missed. I didn't know, you didn't know anything about, Karen, right, about this, the financial picture suddenly changed, and we weren't really in that part of the mix at that time. It was just basically the selectmen's, and I don't know. I mean, if the finance committee should be a little bit more in tune to.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, we will try to do that. But it's just,
Yeah.
it depends on when all of this stuff comes together. I mean, at the very end, we're trying to get things squared away, and
Mhm.
sometimes those types of things fall through the cracks, if you will. So, but no, certainly we'll try to keep you up to date as to where we are in the process.
Because I almost feel like in some ways we're basically like a rubber stamp, in terms of
Well, I think
just
last
seeing
year.
things like,
But didn't you think, I thought last year more than any other year that I've been on the committee, we really scrutinized these budgets and asked a lot of questions.
Yeah, we did.
And I'm not sure that, I think that given what the what the guidelines were for increases for each department, we ensured that everyone was following the same rules. So I think the selectmen sets the sort of what each budget is increased by, and then it's our responsibility to make sure that that's
Mhm.
what's happening, and then we question any variations.
And the other thing was the double budget, that really kinda threw a monkey wrench into the works. But we had to do that to cover ourselves, because if we'd lost there was all talk about an override, and nobody was trying to do an override, and if they'd got their override and voted with the Salisbury, there would have been a mess, and so we were trying to make sure that we had those bases covered, just in case. As in the end, it turned out okay, but those are the types of things we have to deal with on our end, and try to make sure that we cover those things, so that we don't get caught short.
But I thought the whole reason for our liaison would be to kind of go over the budgets or so with these departments to see how they're making them up, so that we would have a better understanding of it and kind of anticipate what the finance committee questions would be and pose that to the department as they're talking with us on their budget process and stuff.
I think that should work very well for you, only because
It should,
if
yes.
you got a person that's really working with the department head, they can get the explanation as to why, okay, this particular line item is gonna go up because of, and you would have that information firsthand and could relay it back to the committee. That you've already worked with the manager, with the department head, and this is what's going on, and I think we need to, or I don't think we need to, whichever the case may be, support it. So I think that would be very, very helpful, if you got the time to do it. Now, that's another issue, but.
So getting back to these regulations, so I'll change number 9, we'll change number 9 to say the finance committee will attempt to obtain budget requests from each town department in advance. And then I think we should, as a matter of running the meetings, we will give ourselves a week to think through after we've had time to ask questions and see if anybody has any other further questions or thinks of anything. So, the number 10, the finance committee will review the current year spending report of all towns departments and voting on the requested budget for the next fiscal year, which we were talking about earlier. And then 11, the above guidelines may be revisited and updated at any time as proposed by any finance committee member and approved by a majority. Anybody have anything else they would like to insert or change or?
No.
So maybe if we can make the changes, I can make these changes and then bring them to the next meeting in February, second Wednesday of February, and we'll just approve them and then put them in the book. Debbie?
Yes,
Sound
that'd be
good?
great, and
Okay.
we'll file them with the town clerk as well.
Okay.
To keep them official as well.
Okay. So I have these, so I can make the corrections on that, Linda. Okay. Then we're on item number 8, updates from FinCom reps, liaisons to the different boards, committees, and departments. So going through the list, I'll defer to Peter for the school update.
Trying to remember all. Well, you were in the same meeting with me.
I know. I'm giving you the opportunity to speak first. Those meetings aren't just on the budget this year. They've opened it up to any kind of issue anybody wants to bring up.
Budget's kind of the smallest
It's
part they
tense,
talk about.
sometimes
They
it
talk
isn't,
about,
yeah.
what were they talk, they didn't really talk, well, I'll tell you what they talked about last time, now that I remember.
Okay.
I would say 70% of the talk was all about the security in the school and stuff like that. And at that time, the superintendent, this was ironic, because this was before the situation that would happen with Connecticut, but he was saying we don't really he doesn't really believe they should have a police officer in the school and stuff like that. And basically, you know, he didn't feel, and someone else that was on the committee didn't really necessarily believe there should be an officer too. That they
Right.
that's what basically Farmer said, that he didn't really think, you know, that he didn't like to have a police car stationed in the front because it made it look like there was trouble at the
Problem,
school
yeah.
and problems and stuff, so that was kind of like a big part of what they discussed about the,
Right, and it did come
And,
up as a budget item, and that Newbury has been funding the police officer
Mhm.
because the school is in the town of, the high school is in the town of Newbury, and they were wanting to share the cost. So then they were proposing, different ideas of splitting the cost, and people were then questioning, do we even really need a
Mhm.
police officer there? So then it wasn't really resolved, but there was discussion about it. There was talk about the posting of the school agendas and the school committee agendas and all, and the notification to the towns of the agendas, and they probably talked to you about that, about the email process.
I think I've seen some emails come in on that, I can't remember.
Okay. And then they talked about the upcoming budget schedule and the process for that. And Brian Forget had some preliminary information on the proposed cuts to different programs by the state. But everything's so preliminary, it's really
I
hard
know,
to
right.
say.
Yeah.
He thought, he was optimistic about it not having a huge impact of what he knew at the time. I think more has come out since then. But it's just to be determined.
oh, and they
so.
also talked about the language thing or something like that, how much more money was gonna be costing
Oh,
because of this new requirement they're talking about with foreign language and stuff like that, and they'd have to have like somebody who, can teach can speak the language and be able to, be able to, teach separate these individuals
Yeah,
that would
not-
require different types of,
yeah, not speak the language, but if you have one child in a grade who is not, who is an English language learner, however that's determined, then you have to have a teacher or teachers, depending on the grade, trained in the 4 core subjects. They have to go through 40 hours of training, I believe, in math, English, social studies, and science. So in the higher grades, you need more teachers going through this training because they're each teaching certain subjects, not everything. So 40 hours of training per grade, per teacher, even if you just have one student. So it's going to be a quite expensive requirement. And I know that was brought up at the selectmen's meeting, and I think there was going to be a motion to join in another town's petition against that new
Well, that was,
law.
I think that was the Oxford letter.
Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah, that wasn't necessarily that particular program, because that program is federally mandated. The one we were
Okay.
looking at was the governor's, the state of Massachusetts, the governor's
Mhm.
alien tuition issue.
Oh, okay.
That's, and we are writing that letter.
Oh, okay. I was mixing the two up.
And Richard Cummings did bring up this federal unfunded mandate.
Yeah.
I think maybe at the December 17th meeting, he may have touched on that
Yes, he did. And
when he first brought up,
Yeah.
he had presented this
Right.
this issue before the board regarding the in-state tuition for illegal aliens and the cost to the state, while at the same time the Chapter 70 was making a correlation. Chapter 70 state aid has gone down consecutively every year since 2002, and if we don't have any money for even our public education system, why is there an executive order bypassing the legislative process to provide this benefit without any debate or discussion or anything?
Yeah, that's what it was.
Well, this governor's talking to the state of the state addresses tonight,
Tonight,
right?
So
So they're proposing,
Oh,
I
uh-oh.
think,
we missed it.
an increase in the, I think the income tax
Yeah,
is what he's
okay.
talking about, going up on the stating. So,
So, Janet, anything on the fire department?
I did
Or,
meet
sorry.
with the. Right here.
Other
You're
day.
right. I did meet with the chief, and we talked about his budget. He thought he was doing fine. They did some maintenance on the fire station, replacing some windows, and that is going well. They did replace 3 windows. He thought he was okay with fuel costs, so he was fine with that. As far as future expenditures, the Tahoe that he drives is, he said, 12 years old, and he's not sure how much longer that's going to last. So that's something that he will be looking to replace. Then a future concern is just this current staffing. The chief plus the 2 full-time firefighters potentially could all retire at the same time, so there's a concern there, and whether or not staff could be brought in to transfer knowledge. So with potentially 5 years out, it's not imminent, but it's not something that can be put off indefinitely either. He did mention that the call firefighters, that he would like to build that up more, but it's not really a budget item, but just kind of a comment that he had there. They have had some, I think only 4 in the past few years they've been able to take in, and most of the call firefighters are quite a bit older. And then we discussed just like the police and the cruisers and the evolving replacement of it. We went over the different engines, and it really all comes back to the fire safety building, and if any of these engines get replaced, if there's no new fire safety building, then it becomes that much more expensive to replace something that fits in the building. So, I'm trying to think, what else do I have? I think that was about it. So, budget-wise, he's fine for this year.
Okay, good. So, Jamie, police department?
Police department, I do not have an update on. I do have several notes from several meetings and then watching 2 meetings on TV. The building inspector has requested mileage reimbursement from the water department. This request is in proportion to the amount of visits to the new plant facility. He did not budget for this increase in visits, and the board voted to approve his request. The 2014 budget has begun its process. There will be cost increases requested that come into play related to the startup costs for the new treatment plant. If the construction remains on schedule, the target is 2014 April. The training for the startup is 60 hours per each water treatment plant employee, and that is slated to begin in the fall. The 2014 budget will request an allowance for overtime to fulfill the training obligation and backfill the employee who is out being trained. 3 change orders were approved by the state. 2 were to offset higher costs, and there was 1 positive. They drilled something differently. I can't pretend like I know what they're talking about. But they did say the savings was $87,000 over what they had projected. It should be noted that the board indicated that change orders are frequent, as many costs are not fixed, and what is easily a positive on one side could become a negative on, so don't get terribly excited about it yet. Okay. And the water treatment plant construction is currently on schedule. They did give 2 abatements to 2 businesses, Ipswich Bay Glass and TRS Gateway. The total abatement for both was $15,621, and their explanation was that there were computer glitches that caused these bills to be inflated over a period of time. Okay. The water board voted to put liens on 8 accounts. They have the opportunity to do this once a year. Each of these accounts are over $500 and over 90 days in arrears. Some were significantly higher than the $500 number. The account holder is responsible for the bill, as well as the $75 fee that is assessed for filing at the Registry of Deeds, and the lien is added to the account holder's property tax bill. So they'll get the money for the bill back plus the filing fee.
Okay.
Unibank is the company that processes the town's online bill pay services. Unibank is now charging a 25-cent fee per transaction. The town's water department is following the lead of the town itself and the electric department in not passing this cost on to the consumer. It was decided that this incursion will roughly cost about $460 a year, and it was determined that it is cost effective to swallow that, as it encourages quick payment of bill and less processing time used by the staff. So that offsets. And I'm sorry to be repetitive, but there are some pretty significant issues in the storage garage completion. In 2006, the town meeting voted to fund a $100,000 garage addition. The stated intent of this garage was to house water department vehicles and equipment. In 2012, the water department asked for and was granted at town meeting an additional $40,000 to complete the last phase of the garage. The town accountant and the Board of Selectmen have discovered that to date, the water department has paid roughly $30,000 out of their expense budget for a kitchen that includes cabinetry, a full range with an oven, range hood, microwave, full-size refrigerator, coffee maker, a table that seats four, a 3/4 bathroom, which includes a sink, toilet, shower, 2 new offices, one which is quite large. These 2 offices have 2 new desks / workstations, 1 executive-style desk, file cabinets, etc. There is 1 office on the ground floor of the garage. They constructed a 2nd floor that was not approved initially. That includes the large office area, a kitchen area, a lounge area that houses a couch, easy chair, and a television. Additionally, there is a washer-dryer hookup on the ground floor. The lounge area and 1 office have an area high on the wall that indicates it would have been a hookup for a flat-screen TV at some point. There is an indication that the furniture and refrigerator were donated to the water department. These items have to be donated to the town, and then the Board of Selectmen have to vote to approve the donation. This protocol was not followed. The cost of the purchased items, as well as the related construction cost, have exceeded the $140,000 approved allotment, and the water department has placed the additional cost into the expense line. The proposal at town meeting denoted this addition as an area that would be designed for storage of equipment, backhoes, etc. There was not a mention of a 2nd floor, office space, bathroom, kitchen, lounge area, etc. This is being brought to your attention as these costs are related to the new addition, and they should be classified as capital expense. Under the capital line, not the expense line. The expense line would be used to replace or repair existing equipment. The additional construction and related furnishings of office spaces, kitchen, bathroom, lounge area were not discussed nor voted on at the town meeting of 2006 and 2012. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. That was very thorough. Okay, so Larry, Highway or Council on Aging?
Boy, hard to follow that act.
That was 4 meetings.
I met with, talked with Scott back in December or so, and there was nothing really new. He hasn't done anything on the budgeting as yet. We've kind of went over some of the other items as far as maintenance of the highways and things like that, but in general, he's just waiting to begin the budgeting process, where he does basically all the budgeting himself. There's no real gathering of, or people together to talk about stuff. Mm-hmm. So he's just waiting.
Okay. And anything on the Council on Aging?
they had a meeting in December which dealt mainly with the Christmas party, and they were supposed to have a meeting today, but that was canceled because of the snow. So they haven't rescheduled anything. So there's nothing new to report there.
Okay. Okay.
I'd just like to commend you folks for doing that type of situation where you actually meet with the department heads. I think it not only gives the department head a little bit more confidence in what he's doing, you understand where he's coming from and what he's dealing with on the outside, things that we don't see, you know, such as the highway department and what his issues are with the roadways and things like that. And I think that's very valuable for you people to have that information, and I commend you for doing that. I really do. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is good. I think it's good to hear the different updates and be a little more in the know before we see the budgets finally. Okay, so next on the agenda is to discuss the meeting. Oh, sorry.
Last time we talked about a alternate liaison for Jack, because you know, he covered a lot of areas, and
Yep.
we don't know if he's or when he's coming back. So I think that should be addressed.
Well, are there other large areas that we're not covering now?
You know, what I could suggest is, since I'm in contact with Karen, maybe, Karen on a day off or something, I know you may work from home on it one day.
Yeah,
a week or
home
something.
on Monday.
You know, we could have you come in and, meet with, under the general government category, that was what Jack was dealing with,
Yep.
those budgets. The other one I was thinking about is the library. I don't think anybody here has been assigned to the library, and it's a pretty big budget and a real key part of, the heartbeat of the town. And I'm just thinking offhand that maybe, if there's somebody that's available that would like to meet with Pam Jacobson and learn a little bit about the operation of the library. So
Yep.
that's really an important budget too.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're closed on Fridays, which is my day off.
But Pam is there on Fridays.
Oh.
She works on Fridays, actually, behind locked doors. So I could arrange something if somebody wanted, if that worked. And if Karen wanted to get plugged into general government, so I know I deal with her on the committee as the primary contact.
Yeah, I could do that on Mondays. That would be-
Yeah, we could, you know, we'll communicate and figure out what will work
Okay.
good for you on that.
Is anybody else interested in the library, being a library liaison? Anybody have time?
I
I
can-
am, but not till after April.
Yeah.
I can do it,
Okay, great.
as long as she's willing to meet on a Friday.
Yeah, let me speak to her,
Okay.
and then I'll contact you, and, because I don't want her to get left off this.
Yep.
You know, there's a
Yep.
lot that she needs to notify you guys about.
If there's a problem, I could probably take it as well. But I'll let you take it first.
That's fair.
He's a little miserable there still.
Anything else on this topic? Okay. So next is the meeting schedule, and what we talked about earlier was, in general, the second Wednesday of each month, we would meet. And then Debbie will plan out the schedule for the selectmen, and then we will subsequently plan out our schedule for the budget season, but we can expect to start the last week of February and through March and April, whatever it takes to. So, but we'll be
Yes.
finalizing that in the next few weeks then.
So I have February 13th,
Yeah, the 12th.
the 12th and the 13th. The 13th?
Oh, the 13th,
Yeah.
yeah. No,
Um,
yeah, I went by Tuesday.
Oh, yeah. If you stick to the Wednesday, so that'd be, the next meeting would be the 13th. and I'll
2:13. Okay,
work
great.
with Karen on getting the agenda set, and like I said, maybe we can you have a presentation from the fiscal team on the revenues and things like that, so you have a good grasp of the overall picture before we start bringing in independent presentations on budgets, and that gives us a little breathing time to get everything ready
Yep.
before you start your meetings.
Okay. Sounds good. So, do I have a motion that we adjourn?
Could I
Oh, sorry.
interrupt again?
Yeah?
I think we still need to mention at the opening of the meeting that the meeting is being recorded, audio and visual. But I also think we ought to put in there, in your opening statement, that no other recording, audio, visual, video, or other would be permitted without the written permission of the Finance Committee.
Don't think you can do that, Larry. The state open meeting law allows.
Allows people to,
Audio
Okay.
record, as long as they don't disrupt the meeting.
And they have to announce it. They can
They
video
have to announce
record,
it.
they can video
Oh,
record
but
or
they-
audio record.
but they have to announce that they're
They have
doing
to,
it.
they have to say that it's
Okay.
The town is allowing the video recording this evening, so usually there's just a disclaimer that the meeting is being video and audio recorded. But anybody can, a newspaper reporter could come in and just lay the tape recorder on the table or something like that, or, you know, it's common, you know,
Right.
they just can't do it in secret.
Right.
And it can't disrupt the meeting.
Mhm.
Right.
Whatever they're doing can't disrupt the meeting, so, and that's part of the open meeting law,
Okay.
so.
So we'll be on YouTube.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Okay.
But I can state that at the start of the meetings, just to, is that what you,
I think we had agreed that we'd start the meeting with that.
okay.
I didn't know that we couldn't do that, but that's fine.
Okay. So I'll try to remember for the next meeting, and if I don't, you can keep me honest.
Use the book.
So, okay, with that, now do I have a motion that we adjourn?
I make a
9:20.
motion that we adjourn.
Okay,
I'll second it.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any objections? All right. Thank you, everybody.